Okay guys, welcome back. We're going to be doing Kingdom Animalia, Unit 10. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, animal characteristics, we have heterotrophs. Animals are heterotrophs, so that means that they do ingest other organisms as their food or for nutrients. This also makes them consumers, okay? Whereas plants, remember, they were autotrophic. They could make their own food. That would make them producers. Animals are multicellular, meaning they're more complex. They do not have cell walls. Remember, plants, protists, those did have cell walls. This does allow for quick movement. And then sexual reproduction, this allows for no alteration of generations, and there are no haploid gametophytes.
Okay guys, here's another cladogram. This one's for our animal evolution. The main stuff that I want you guys to pay attention to right now is the common ancestor, which are protists. And then remember, you have your organisms along the top as they evolved. And then down on the bottom, you've got these traits. So you've got like multicellularity, tissues, bilateral symmetry, body cavities, coelom, segmentation, endoskeleton, and backbone. In this podcast, we're going to be going over tissue, symmetry, and body cavities. And then as we go along in the podcast, you'll be learning about the other things.
Case body area surfaces, we've got dorsal. This refers to the back or upper surface. Ventral refers to the belly or lower surface. Anterior refers to the head or the front end. Posterior is going to refer to the tail or hind end opposite the head. And then we have cephalization. This is the concentration of nerves and sense organs in the head region. Okay, so you can see here is a fish. You've got the dorsal, you've got ventral on the belly side, you've got posterior, which is opposite the head, and then you've got anterior.
Okay, so let's talk about symmetry a little bit. There's going to be 3 different types of symmetry. Asymmetrical, radial, and bilateral. Remember in science, a lot of times if there's an A at the beginning of the word, it means without or none. So asymmetrical is going to be no symmetry at all. Radial we'll talk about in just a second, and bilateral symmetry would be like the type of symmetry in our bodies. Okay, so symmetry, for the definition, it's the arrangement of body parts around a central plane or axis. And like I said, asymmetry occurs when the body cannot be divided into similar sections. Okay, so that's no symmetry at all. And the example that they show us here would be sponges, like sea sponges. And you can see here that there's no actual symmetry in them. If you cut into them at any point, you wouldn't have mirror images on each side. The second kind was the radial symmetry, and that's when the body parts are arranged around a central point. The example they give us would be like spokes on a wheel. And the animal example that has radial symmetry is echinodermata or echinoderms. Most animals with radial symmetry are going to be sessile or sedentary. Sessile, remember, means kind of attached to their environment. Sedentary means that they don't move much at all. Here's a picture of a starfish and another just kind of sea anemone that has radial symmetry. And it's just kind of showing you everyday examples like a flower pot. And like they said, spokes on a wheel. Those are the types of things that have radial symmetry. And then the last symmetry was bilateral symmetry. That's the type of symmetry we have. It occurs when animals can be divided into equal halves along a single plane. So these organisms are going to have like a right and a left side, just like we have, you know, right arm, left leg, vice versa. You know what I mean? And they're going to be mirror images of each other. So this is also a sign of a more complex type of symmetry in the organism. The bilateral symmetry will be. Animals with bilateral symmetry are usually going to be motile. That makes sense. It's us. It's other animals. They're going to be moving around a lot. They're also going to have an anterior and a posterior end. There's also going to be the cephalization, which we talked about just a second ago, which is the concentration of the sensory organs on the head or anterior end. So that's like us, right? We've got the concentration of our sensory organs in our heads. Bilateral symmetry just images another example. So dancing skeleton, that's us. Lobster is bilaterally symmetrical. And again, just kind of another example of not an organism, but that something that has bilateral symmetry would be the shovel.
Okay, moving on to segmentation. This occurs whenever animal bodies are divided into repeating units or segments. So these are found in more complex animals. Earthworms show external segmentation. Humans show internal segmentation, such as our backbone. Segments may fuse. This is called cephalothorax. You can see an example of cephalothorax here in this lobster. Its main body cavity here is an example.
Okay, so then tissue development, we've touched on this all year. We start out with the haploid cells, which would be the sperm and the egg, and you can see that their symbol down here is N and N. And when those two combine together, you get your zygote, okay? Reminder that the zygote is by definition the fertilized egg, and it's gonna undergo rapid cell division called cleavage, okay? So once that sperm fertilizes the egg and the zygote is formed, then it's going to immediately have a lot of cell division going on, and it's gonna form something called a blastula, which is basically like a hollow ball of cells, and it's gonna look like this, okay? So the blastula is going to have just these two main parts, all right? Remember, COEL basically means like cavity or space. And so the blastocele is this inside space. It's the center cavity of the blastula, and it's going to have one germ layer called the blastoderm. Notice that it says derm, okay? Derm means skin in science. It's basically like the skin of the cell. It's just that outside part. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
All right, blastopores may become the mouth or the anus. The mouth is called the protostome. If it becomes the anus, it's called deuterostome. In mollusk, arthropods, and annelids, it becomes the protostomes, which is the mouth. And in echinoderms and vertebrates, it becomes the mouth, which is the anus, which is deuterostome.
All right, so this is, again, just kind of a little image to give you an idea. We start out with the fertilized egg, which is the zygote. It becomes the blastula. There you can see that inner cavity again, the blastocele. And then it's going to go on to become the gastrula, okay? And what Coach Burnett was just talking about with those openings, that's either the mouth or the anus, is the blastopore. That space is right here. And then it's just showing you these two layers that it's going to have. It's going to have an ectoderm and an endoderm, which is basically going to be outside germ layer and inside germ layer. All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about is body cavities of animals, and there's going to be 3 different types that they can have. Body cavity, by definition, is the space for organ system development, okay? And what it does is it increases the digestive and the reproductive systems. The actual coelom itself allows complex structures to develop, like the stomach. It's going to have a mesoderm and an endoderm interact during the development. Okay, so let's look at these 3 different types of body cavities. Remember what I said about A in front of terms in science. A lot of times it means without. So acoelomate means without a coelom. It just has its ectoderm, its mesoderm, and its endoderm. There's no inner body cavity there. Then we have our pseudocoelomate, and remember when we talked about protists having pseudopodia. Pseudo means false, okay? So pseudocoelomate would be like a false coelom. So there's the ectoderm, the mesoderm, the endoderm, and you can see here that it has kind of this very small pseudocele. That's kind of a false body cavity. There's not much to it though. And then lastly, you've got the coelomates, which they have a true body cavity. There's the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm, but here you can see this space around the endoderm. That's the true body cavity. And an example that they're showing here is the common earthworm. A common earthworm is a coelomate. Okay, that's going to wrap up our first podcast of this unit. Make sure you guys took notes, watch it again if you need to, and we'll see you in class.